Welcome to another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer. I have got a very special guest on tonight's episode. It's Pride Month, and what better way to acknowledge Pride Month than with one of my favorite movies of all time, the movie Pride from 2014. It's about the miners' strike in Wales back in 1984-85, and the support of the miners by the Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners, LGSM. It's a mouthful. Anyway, one of the individuals portrayed in the movie is joining me on tonight's episode. The wonderful Jonathan Blake is here all the way from London in the UK. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you, Randy. It's really great to be with you.
Well, I've got to say, I've been wanting to have you on the show for some time. I feel like I've known you forever. But we really only just connected, October or November of 2020. And I think that was through your participation in the I Can Give You campaign.
Yeah, and I have to say that campaign I thought was just genius.
Oh,
really,
I appreciate
really special. No. I mean, it's a really powerful sort of piece of information for people, and really positive. And that I think is really important.
Yeah, that's certainly the focus that I intended in it. I mean, you're wearing the U equals U shirt. That's certainly a cause that is near and dear to my heart. And I love the idea that those of us living with HIV who are able to achieve an undetectable viral load can't pass on the virus. But I wanted the focus to be more on what we can give, because there's so much more that we can give other than just that one aspect of ourselves that we can't give, thankfully. So that's...
I think that that's what was really important, because so often everything is very negative and sort of muted. So your campaign was something that was just really, really sort of positive and upbeat, as well as giving the message.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from a long-term survivor like yourself, Jonathan. So I didn't want to have a long introduction before we began the show, because I really want to hear your story. And I just want to let the viewers know that a very small window of your life has been shown to the public in the movie Pride. And I'm sure it was somewhat fictionalized to a certain degree. I know it was based on true events, but I know that the Jonathan Blake portrayed in the film isn't necessarily the real Jonathan Blake. But I'd really love to hear more about the Jonathan Blake story. I know you are coming up to birthday number 72, and when I look at you through the wonders of technology, I would never guess that. So that is kudos to you, my friend. I'm excited to be able to talk to someone who has been living with the virus as long as you have, and has been living with it really since the onset of the pandemic. And if I'm not mistaken, you were one of the first individuals in the UK to be diagnosed as living with HIV, correct?
Yeah. I mean, my hospital number at the Middlesex Hospital was London 1. So I was the first at the Middlesex Hospital diagnosed with it was then called HTLV3.
Right.
I mean, they were dark days. They were really, really sort of dark days. When they what happened essentially was that every single lymph node in my body just erupted, and I was walking around like a gorilla. I couldn't put my arms by the side of me. Sort of, my groins were just sort of made me sort of walk bandy-legged. And I made an appointment to go and see my GP, who I was living at that point in the East End. And as I walked in, she stood up and she put out her hand and she said, "Shake my hand." And as I shook her hand, she felt the lymph node there. And it was really painful. I said, "What did you do that for?" She said, "That's the sailor's handshake." She said, whenever the sailors went into port, they would shake the women or the men's hands that they went with, and they would feel that lymph node. And if that lymph node was up, it was a sign of syphilis, and they wouldn't go with them. So she said, "Have you been to the special clinic recently?" I said, "No, I haven't." So she said, "Well, I think you should go." So I went off. At that point, I was going to James Pringle House, which was part of the Middlesex Hospital. And I went there, and suddenly they were all over me. and they wanted to do a biopsy. So they took me in. And in those days, if you were queer, you were always put in a side ward. So you wouldn't kind of, infect anybody with your queerness. I mean, it's
Right.
crazy. But anyway, so I was in this sort of side ward, and they did a biopsy. And I was then kept there for 2 days. And they then came back and they said, you have a virus. It is, we have nothing to treat it with. Basically, it's a terminal diagnosis. You have about 6 months to live, and that's it. There will be palliative care. Go home.
Wow.
I mean, I was just totally shell-shocked.
And you were how old at the time?
I was 33.
Okay.
33. I sort of, worked for 10 or so years as an actor, and I just felt my life was over before it had even started.
Sure, I bet.
And I sort of went back to my my flat in the East End, and I kind of closed the door and I just shut off. I just shut down. I didn't get in touch with people. And in the December of that year, I decided that I'd heard enough. I had lived in New York in 1974. I'd been to San Francisco in 1981. I had friends in the States. I was hearing what was happening, and I just thought, I can't deal with this. So I decided that I was going to run a hot bath, and I would sort of take a few pills, have a few drinks, and I would just slit my wrists and leach out. And of course, the voice of my mother came in my head, Jonathan, you clear up your own mess. You don't leave it for others to clear up. And I just thought, I am going to leave one hell of a mess.
Right.
And so I couldn't do it. So then it's a question, well, what are you going to do? How is one going to sort of, get over this? I have got this killer virus coursing through my veins. I don't want to infect anybody. How on earth what am I going to do? How am I going to live? And I used to sort of go off to bars, but I would always stand in the corner because I wanted to be with people. But of course, I didn't want to talk to anyone, because what am I going to say? How am I going to tell them that I've got this killer virus? I mean, it was really, really bleak. And I remember sort of one day I picked up a copy of a news sheet called Capital Gay. And there was this tiny little advertisement. Gays for a nuclear-free future are running a coach leaving from Gays the Word on the 1st of April 1983, going to this stand together around Greenham Common, the American Air Base and Women's Camp, Burfield and Aldermaston, which were the 2 British nuclear establishments. And they were going to form basically a ring around it, people holding hands. And I thought, all right, that's going to be my entry into society. So I remember on the 1st of April, it was the Saturday, I kind of girded my loins and I set off from my flat in the East End to Marchmont Street, to Russell Square. And I remember coming out of Russell Square tube station, and I could see the coach way up by Gaze the Word bookshop. And I just thought, what the am I doing here? And I was about to literally swing on my heels and leave when this voice said, hello, my name's Nigel, who are you? And I stopped and I looked, and there was this young guy who was wearing crimson and ochre pantaloons, green Wellington boots, a blue Fair Isle singlet, and this mass of black hair, curly hair. And that was Nigel Young. Yeah, absolutely. And that was Nigel Young. And we just spent the whole day together. I told him about my diagnosis. I don't think he heard. I think it just washed over him. I don't know. But we were just yabba, had a fantastic day. Wow. And then at the end of the day, we were all invited to a party in a squat in West Hampstead, given by Noel Gregg, who I knew from Gay Sweatshop. He ran Gay Sweatshop. So anyway, we went there, still chatting away. And the next day I invited him to come and have tea over in the East End. So he arrives the next day. He brings tea. He brings a bunch of anemones and 2 jam donuts. What could be better? And he basically said, look, you're living isolated in the East End. I, at the moment, am living up in North London in a squat, but I know of a squat in Brixton. Why don't we move in together? And I just thought, you know, I'm going to be dead in a matter of months. Why not? So we just did it. He knew someone who wanted to sublet my flat. That was fine. And we did. And we're still together. I mean, all these years later.
That's incredible.
Well, but yeah, it's just been incredible. And he was incredibly politically active. He'd been a member of the Gay Left Collective. So it was he who really got us involved with Lesbian and Gay Men Support the Miners, because the moment that sort of, you know, this was on the cards, yeah, we were in. And it was, for me, it was really interesting because when I had worked as an actor, or been working as an actor in 1972, 73, I did pantomime at the Swansea Grand Theatre. I was playing the genie of the lamp in Aladdin. And the miners' strike created this, what they call the 3-day week. So you had electricity for 3 days and 4 days you didn't. So the theatre got in a ship's fog light and a generator. So on those 4 days, the show could go on. I mean, it was white light, but the show went on and it was amazing. So, of course, sort of, I had memories of that. So the idea of actually supporting, you know, miners in South Wales, yeah, that was great. And of course, my mother was born in Swansea. Her father was the rabbi there.
Oh, wow.
And then in the March of 1914, they emigrated to Canada. So they first went to Winnipeg, and then for some reason, and I don't know why, and of course my parents aren't around, or my mother isn't around to ask the question, he turned reform. So he was Orthodox, went to Winnipeg, turned reform, and then moved to Montreal. And so in 1924 they moved to Montreal, and then in 1926 he died at the age of 24 of a massive heart attack, and they were left penniless. And so they sold everything to get their passage back to England. And my mother's aunt, so my mother's mother's sister, had married a man called Louis Silkin and was living in Dulwich. So they moved back and they moved there. So sort of, so it was extraordinary. So hence, you know, I'm here. And what's interesting is that I'm now living in Herne Hill, which is in South London, and just down the road is Dulwich. And when my parents eventually came to where I'm living, you know, I was thinking, I can't tell my parents that I am living, you know, off Relton Road, because all they'll think of is the riots, you know, the riots of 1981 and what's his name. But I'm living here, so I must tell them. So I told them, and my mother went, oh, well, that's lovely. I used to walk down Relton Road every day to catch the bus from Brixton down to the Elephant and Castle, where she went to school. And she remembered it from 1926. And of course, in those days, it was very smart.
Right.
So in her head, this was wonderful that I should be living here.
Well, perfect. It's good that sometimes our parents feel that way, whether it's true or not, right?
Occasionally.
Exactly. Yeah. So the depiction of Jonathan Blake by Dominic West in the movie Pride, how close is that to what the reality was of that time for you, Jonathan?
You know, it's really difficult. In a way, I don't think it's close at all. But there is a truth to it. And I really think that Stephen Beresford has written a really brilliant script, you know, and it's got humor. And so those moments that people might kind of get turned off, suddenly they just get caught again.
Yeah.
They were amazing times. And of course, for me, it was even more incredible because it was displacement activity. And for me, displacement activity is always important because that's the way that you keep yourself busy, so you're not having to think about your diagnosis. You're not going to, you know, have to think about sort of, you know, what is waiting around the corner for you. So, you know, the more that I could sort of, you know, keep doing things, the better it was. So this was just fantastic. And I mean, the mining community, I mean, what they gave to us, you know, their generosity of spirit, given that they are under attack. You know, we knew as gay men, certainly, we knew what the power of the state was and how miserable they could make their lives, you know, our lives if they wanted to. You know, the miners were the aristocracy of the working class. They had no idea of what they'd let themselves in for. I mean, they sure found out. I mean, you know, they found out there, they found out in Orgrave. So the fact that they just offered us, I mean, they welcomed us with open arms. It was quite extraordinary, and it was wonderful sort of going down there. And of course, we're still connected. I mean, you know, all these years on, we're still connected, you know, with people down there and families down there. And you know, for me, particularly sort of Sean James, it's just, you know, amazing, an absolute sort of, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing what that initially a small initiative through Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners has turned into, you know, human rights for queer folks in the UK.
I mean, that is really what is amazing is the fact that it was the South Wales miners who put pressure on the National Union of Miners to use their block vote to get lesbian and gay rights onto or into the Labour Party's manifesto. And lots of people, you know, over the years had tried to do it, and it had never happened. There were always excuses why it couldn't. But this time, with the block vote of the NUM, it happened. And that is amazing. And from that, we got civil partnerships.
Yeah. I mean, just outstanding, and I can't say enough good things about the movie. I thoroughly enjoy it. I've watched it. I can't even count the number of times that I've watched the movie, and it always leaves me laughing. It leaves me crying. It's a roller coaster, but it's such a fun movie. And you're right, Stephen Beresford's writing is absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So
no, he really sort of he did us proud. He did us proud.
Yeah, and I know I've got a bit of a fetish for T-shirts, and I've been on the hunt. I was actually just on the internet today trying to find a Pits and Perverts vintage T-shirt that I could purchase somewhere. I've yet to find it, but
wow, vintage one. I mean, you know, Gaze the Word has got them printed new, but vintage. Wow,
even new. I don't think I could find them on the internet that would ship to Canada. So
I'm quite sure that Gaze the Word will, and if not, I will send you one.
I will make some arrangements then when we get off the air for sure. So one of the things, obviously, as someone living with HIV myself for a much shorter period of time than yourself, I've been living with HIV for a little over 6 years now. Mm-hmm. We're celebrating 40 years roughly since the idea of HIV and AIDS first came to light in the world. I think we know that it was around certainly prior to 81, but 81 was when the light started to shine on it. And I speak to a lot of folks and have had the great honor and pleasure of meeting a number of individuals who identify as long-term survivors, or some who like to call themselves long-term thrivers. Nothing but huge respect and gratitude for long-term survivors as someone newly infected. But I'm wondering, what do you attest to the fact that that you made it? You know what I mean?
I mean, I haven't a clue. I can only think that my parents must have given me a good set of genes.
Right.
Because, like, kind of, you know, there seems to be no reason, you know, why I should have survived and other people didn't, except that I suppose that I made certain choices, or I was allowed to make certain choices. So, for instance, there was the Concord program that we had over here, which was when they were testing the use of AZT. And essentially, AZT, we later learn, is a failed chemotherapy drug. At that point, we didn't know, you know, that was the case. But what they were doing was that they were giving people 3 grams of this poison in the course of a day. So a gram in the morning, a gram in the afternoon, and a gram in the evening. I mean, when AZT, you know, then got used, it was 0.125 milligrams. And, you know, what happened happens with, you know, old chemotherapy drugs is that they wipe out your immune system. They're wiping out the cancer, but they wipe everything out. So it leaves you open to any opportunistic infection that's around. Anyway, I was asked if I would join this trial. And they were explaining that you have a cohort and you cut it in half, and then one half gets the placebo and the other half gets the pill. So I said, well, do you kind of match people up, pair people up, so that someone who's got a kind of similar build to myself or similar metabolism as we're paired up, and then one of us gets the pill, one of us gets the placebo. And they went, oh, no, that's far too complicated. And I just saw red. And I got a bit belligerent. And I said, well, now, I said, if you could put a plank down the middle of me and you give me one half the pill and the other half the placebo, and we see which half does best, that I think is a trial. But if you can't be bothered to do that, I can't be bothered to do your trial. And I actually think that by not taking the AZT, that's one of the reasons that I am still here, because most of the people who took AZT, either they just couldn't tolerate it and they stopped, or it just opened them up to all the opportunistic infections, and they went. So, yeah,
I know your character in the movie makes a comment and attributes it to smoking cannabis as what may have.
Too.
Well, I know I'm on antiretrovirals, but I'm still going with that therapy as well. And so far, it's been working great for me.
Yeah. Well, I can see. I mean, you look glowing.
So tell me, we know what happened up to 84, 85 in Jonathan Blake's life. What about post-movie times?
Well, post-movie times, basically, what happened was that you know, I was out of work and unemployed, and the leader of the Greater London Council was a man called Ken Livingstone, and Ken Livingstone ran London. He ran the Greater London Council. The GLC were directly opposite the House of Parliament. Thatcher hated them. You know, he was Red Ken. But he had this amazing policy that if you were out of work and unemployed, you could pay £1, and for the whole year, you could do any number of courses at any of the other education centres. There was places like Morley College or City Lit, or any other education place. And it was incredible. And so Nigel and I would go off and we would do things. And one day, he and a friend of his, Barry Prothero, were going off to do a trouser making class. And I said, oh, that sounds fun. Can I come along? Of course, the more the merrier. So we waltzed off to an adult education place just not far from where I live, or where we live, in a place called the Strand Institute. And it was up on the 5th floor. It was an old school building, and the 5th floor was where the old science laboratories used to be. So the tables were big and tall. And there was this lovely elderly Jewish tailor called Harry. And the first thing that Harry said was, I want you to all sit cross-legged on the table, because that's how tailors used to sit. They'd have a board on their lap, on a table. My father used to sell furniture. If you ever sat on a table, you were screamed at, get off a table, chairs are sitting on not table. So with one phrase, Harry had given me permission. So I'm sitting on the table, you know, doing my tatting, doing my sewing. And I think, how many pairs of trousers do I need? What I really need to do is learn how to make a pattern. And somebody pipes up, oh, they do that at the London College of Fashion down at Shoreditch. So I thought, right, I'll go down to London College of Fashion. I've paid my pound. So down I went and I enrolled for a pattern making class. Loved it. And while I was doing that, one of the tutors said, oh, by the way, we do this 3-year City and Guild diploma in tailoring. Might you be interested? And I thought, I'll be dead before I finish that. But yeah, I mean, it would keep me busy, keep me occupied. The strike is over. So I enrolled and I was able to get a grant from the councils. They weren't loans, they were still grants. And so I did it.
Wonderful story. I am so grateful for the time that you've taken with us today to bring us a little up to date on the Jonathan Blake story. I know there's more, and I do hope that you'll be able to share some more of your story with us in the very near future. Sorry, my timer just went off saying that we are running out of time for the show.
Listen, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, for me, absolutely a great pleasure. I am, once again, I just want to tell you how grateful I am that you've taken the time to be with us. Your story is inspirational. I, for one, am incredibly happy that you are still with us, surviving and living a fabulous life with HIV, both you and Nigel. And again, I want to thank you for all that you have done for me and other folks living with HIV right across the globe, just by living and being you and showing us that, you know, this is a chronic illness that we can all live with and manage. And I'm grateful that I feel like I have the opportunity to call Jonathan Blake my friend now. And that means the world to me, Jonathan. So thank you once again for being on the show this evening. I do hope you'll come back for a future episode. And thank all of you for watching another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer.